For those of you who've attended the HEET convening at Renton Technical College in January, you might hear some of the things that you've heard there. We do have a couple of detailed things to jump into that we'll go through when it comes to the update to the application. But welcome, everyone. I'm Anna Olson. I'm a policy associate at the state board, and I am one of the two people on the HEET team at the state board. So Megan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Megan Harper. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the program administrator for the HEET program. Thank you all for joining us.
So today we're going to talk about the purpose of the HEET funding, who may apply, the requirements for the grant, how you may be able to use the funds. Then we'll talk about the changes to the application. If you've logged into GMS already, you'll see that we've made, we took some things out, we added some things. Megan will walk us through those changes. We'll talk about the important dates and deadlines, and we'll have some time for Q&A. So I see some new faces here. So I'm glad that you are not all going to be hearing the repeat of our Renton conversation. But let's talk about the purpose of the HEET funds. The purpose of this program that is now going into its 18th year is to develop or expand innovative programs in partnerships with unions and employers in support of incumbent healthcare workers. Those three elements are really important, and we will talk about them over and over, that it is a partnership between an educational institution, a community or technical college, a labor union in service to incumbent workers as they're advancing their careers in their industry. All CTCs are eligible to apply, but you may only have one application on which you are the lead college. So you may be a participant as a secondary partner in a consortium project. So in essence, be a part of multiple HEET projects, but you can only apply as a lead on one. Each application for individually run projects is up to $250,000, and consortia projects may request more funds if that is necessary. And we are funding both new and continuing proposals, and we'll talk about the distinction and the requirements for both. The new proposals, you are trying to test an idea, stand up a program, you need some ramp up time, you are able to request funding for that new project and fund your planning activities and implementation activities with HEET grant. You are not required in that first year to have any students enrolled. Enrollments are required in the second year of HEET proposals. As a system, we're obligated to produce 50 FTEs through HEET funding. Again, that is a cumulative number. So your college, your project is not responsible for 50 FTEs, but you are a contributor to that. So we're going to be looking at if it is a competitive year and we're looking at making funding decisions, we'll need to know that we are able to reach that 50 FTE figure each year, and we've been able to so far in all the years that we've funded HEET. For new proposals, as I mentioned, you can request funds to plan and implement activities with optional students enrollments. Continued proposals must have those enrollments, but all proposals, regardless of whether they're new or continuing, must have 3 partners involved: the CTC, that is the applicant, labor unions, and healthcare employers. So you can have multiple employers participate. You can have multiple labor organizations represented, but there must be at least one. And it is very important that when we say labor unions, that it is not, it is specific to organized labor. We are not talking workforce development councils or any other kind of organization that may sound like, like they're representing employees. It has to be an actual collective, the occupations that you will be serving must be collectively bargained. And a labor union is a partner that will provide an attestation in the form of letter of support that they are indeed participating in this project. I think that is probably the most common reason why projects are not funded, is this misunderstanding of what labor partner means. So if you have questions, please, as you're developing your applications, please reach out to me and Megan. We can talk about how to get labor partners involved. We can connect you with Washington State Labor Council. We can connect you with the SEIU 1199 Training Fund. We can help you in that process, but projects that do not have labor participation will not qualify. And same with employers, there needs to be at least one employer involved. So proposals must address one or more of the following goals, and they don't have to address all of the goals. Again, one of the things that we noticed in the previous years is that applicants feel pressure to address all of them, kind of fitting, a square peg into the round hole, and it's not always working. So at least one of these goals needs to be addressed. So enhance accessibility and academic progression for hospital and outpatient healthcare workers through college healthcare prerequisite courses and or certificate and degree programs. Projects may address an industry shortage or other pressing workforce need, lead to the increased capacity of the college system in nursing and other high-demand healthcare fields, bring greater diversity to the healthcare workforce, and build stronger labor union management education partnership. You may be able to meet all of them. You may be able to meet only one or a few of these goals. So you will see some changes to the application that make that clear, that you don't need to check every single box when submitting your application. So should you be awarded these funds, they are flexible with some limitations. You are able to fund curriculum development and modification. You can invest in equipment needs for this new program or existing program if you're adapting it in some ways, recruitment and retention activities, instructional costs, program evaluation, all those costs are allowable. However, student tuition and fees are not allowable expenses. And you are able to support students directly with such activities as tutoring, childcare, transportation, but that should not exceed 20% of funding. And I have to admit that, this got confusing. It was my fault at Renton, about the student support. This is correct. No tuition is allowed. Student direct supports are allowed, whether directly as a budget line through contract with another student support entity. That is up to you and how you develop that project, but these are the rules. So apologies for confusion a couple months ago. So Megan, I'm going to pass this over to you to talk about changes for fiscal year 26, but maybe I'll stop for just a moment and see if there are any questions about kind of the overarching goals, uses of funds, anything else, partnerships. Seeing none, Megan, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so as Anna mentioned, we do have a couple of changes for this fiscal year. So some of the questions will be different. There is a new requirement that you submit a RACI matrix, and our scoring rubric is a little different. So I'm going to go over each of those individually. And so first, the changes to the questions, we did kind of edit some of them to make sure that the focus remains on supporting the incumbent worker, also this known as the student, and the alignment with the goals that Anna was just going over a few moments ago. There are 7 sections that include narrative responses, but not all projects are going to require answers to all questions. So if you've submitted a HEET application in the past and you're like, oh, this looks bigger or longer, it's not necessarily. It depends on your project, on what questions you actually will be answering. We've also reduced the number of characters in your responses to encourage clarity and brevity. You could. So those questions, the first section is going to be the newest and most biggest change this year, and that is section 3, which includes questions 3.1 through 3.11. And this is where we look at the alignment with the funding goals. So as Anna mentioned, not all projects need to address all of the funding goals, but if your project does, there will be a response that you need to answer. If it doesn't, you don't have to include a response. That's okay. And addressing all goals does not improve your scores overall. We want to look at your answers to those particular goals and evaluate from there. So don't feel like you need to just throw it all in there and answer everything with as much as you can. We would like you to be specific and to the point. And I did some screenshots from OGMS just to give you a little peek here if you haven't looked already. So this is section 3. And as you can see, the section or question 3.1 at the very end has a little red dot that indicates that a response is required to that question, but section 3 or question 3.3 does not have a dot. That's not required unless you answer yes to 3.2. Our system can be a little confusing in that you're going to see all of the questions. If you say, yes, our project addresses this, and you don't put in a response to the next question there where it says, please describe, you're going to get a little error notice if you try and save. So I highlighted that there where it says required field. If you click no, and on if you can move to the next slide there, you'll see on 3.7, I clicked no and moved forward on 3.9. You don't have a required field error message coming up. So in those places, answer the questions that are aligning to your project specifically. When you click save, it will let you know if you've done it right or not. Those little errors will come up. If you encounter issues, State Board staff is here to assist, so please reach out. Anna, you can go to question 3.11 here, so I can do my mea culpa. In our changing of the application materials, I did have an error on my part where I did not include a follow-up question for 3.11. So if your project builds a stronger labor union management education partnership in order to leverage public and private investment, and this is something that the review committee should consider, please put that into a Word document or create a PDF and upload that in OGMS as an attachment. You're going to be uploading your signatures page, your RACI document, which we'll talk about in a second. And again, I apologize. There were a lot of changes and lots of things happening going on, and I just missed that question. So again, if you think that that is something that the review committee should consider, please upload that to OGMS with your other application materials. So questions in section 5 through 7, these address student enrollments in fiscal year 26. We have asked about this previously, but it got a little complicated, and I tried to simplify this. So if your project is new, as Anna mentioned, you are not required to include student enrollments. You would submit answers for section 5. The project can include student enrollments, though, if it is new. If that is the case, you would complete questions in section 6. Continuing projects that are in year 2 are required to include student enrollments, and section 7 would be the section that would need to be completed. And then I will pause here and let Anna address question 10 or
Yes,
section 10.
thank you. So this is a new question, and we're asking you to describe how you used AI in development or writing of this application. AI is a very useful tool and can save you a lot of time, but we want to first of all, we want to understand how applicants are using it. And second, we want to make sure that when we're evaluating your project, we're evaluating the actual application and not only AI generated content. So we spent quite a bit of time on this at Renton at the HEET convening talking about this. And the example that I'll use is, if you are feeding prompts into, ChatGPT that say, here are the required roles for our labor and management partners. Please write that in a concise paragraph. Great. If you are putting in what should the roles of labor and management partners be for a healthcare grant application and having AI generate it, that is not what we'd like to read. So we're just asking for for your application to be an accurate representation of the project that you are looking to be funded. And like I said, we certainly do not intend to say do not use AI. If it can save everyone time, that's great. Just we're learning on what its efficient uses are, and would like to learn from you.
I will pause this here and see, are there any questions about the questions or the changes to the questions before we move on? All right. Moving on. So a new requirement is a RACI matrix. And if you have not heard of a RACI before, it's a project management tool that helps define and clarifies roles and also responsibilities of a project. Sometimes it's referred to as a responsibility assignment matrix. But we are going to be using this year in lieu of the long narrative question where you explain what are the partners doing, who is responsible for all of those things. So hopefully this will reduce the amount of time that you need to put into that activity, and also make it a little bit more straightforward and clear for our review committee to look at. You can go to the next slide, Anna. So here the purpose, kind of already mentioned that, and then the definitions. So RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And you can see that it differentiates between who is responsible for performing a task or process, who's going to be overseeing that and be essentially accountable for the completion of that, folks who are consulted, and others who are just informed. So they have different roles based on a specific task. Next slide. And I've provided a little screenshot here of an example, but I want to start with, this is just an example. There are many ways to set these up, and I encourage you to use the setup that works best for your project and your partners. These slides do have a link to the source of this example, and that we'll also post the slides to the HEET page, so you can click on that and look around and see other options. There is a Excel spreadsheet, a really quick template that I mocked up for you to use as well. It should be in the OGMS application materials. After I stop yammering here, I'll try and pop that into the chat, so if you'd like to use that. But again, it is just an example to help you get going with it. And as you go, if you have questions or you need help working through this, please reach out. I'll make sure to put my chat in the email. It's also in these slide materials as well. I know this is a different thing, and sometimes folks are familiar with it and others are not. But we're hoping that this will help us get a better idea of who is doing what, and also help you as you go through the project. So in the case that you have turnover on your end or your partner has some turnover, this can help quickly realign who does what and keeping track of all of the deliverables that are part of the project. Any questions? All brave souls. They're just taking on races without a question asked. Okay. So we did make some slight changes to our scoring rubric. It was simplified a bit. And one of the changes was that we went from a 1 to 5 scale to a 0 to 1. So if a score of 0 is given, it is not recommended for funding. So you no longer get a point if you're not recommended for funding. No ginormous changes to any of the details about those scores themselves. They're pretty much the same from last year. But now, again, it's a 0 to 4 scale instead of 1 to 5, where 0 is the lowest and 4 is the highest. If we run into a situation like we did this year, where we have more projects requesting money than we have to give out, we implement a priority element scoring system. So if of the roughly $2 million that we have available, all of our requests are under that, we do not use the scoring rubric. If they exceed that roughly $2 million amount, we implement the scoring rubric, which will give additional points for student enrollment, nursing expansion, behavioral health integration, and mental health and self-care components, increasing diversity of nursing students and faculty, and then also for rural area colleges. Some important dates and deadlines. So the applications are open. You should be able to see them in OGMS. They are due on April 3rd and due by 11:55 p.m. State board staff are available to assist until 4 p.m. If you have questions about how to submit, we're here to help you. But I would strongly encourage you to work on submitting it prior to the 3rd. And definitely contact, I'll go over this in the next slide, but contact your security contacts at your college before April 3rd. Because you do need access to this specific application in the system, and if you've had access in the past, you still need to request access for this year's application. There is a user manual. Your college has specific security contacts who should be able to help you as well. But if you're both stumped or you just really need some extra support, Carrie Kaufman is the person in our fiscal team who is the OGMS point of contact. I'm also available, and we have another staff person, Melanie Keelick, who can help as well. And here's the contact information. You see Anna, my email, Carrie, and Melanie's emails here. So we are all available if needed.
So before we go to Q&A, I just want to add a bit of information about the scoring. Is that the scoring is done by a committee that consists of representatives from healthcare employers, labor, an educational institution who is not an applicant, our Center of Excellence, state board staff. So me and Megan, we do not score the applications, and we're here to assist you. We, of course, we don't assist you with content, but we can kind of lead you through the process, answer questions about, how to, find partners, whatever questions you may have, come to us, and we'll provide you with assistance throughout this process. The review committee members, change very slightly from year to year. Oh, and we also have an agency partner. So they are familiar with the project, with the, with HEET. Sometimes, this year our industry participants will be returning. They've been not involved for a few years, so that there's some fresh eyes on these applications. But we try to create, a fair playing field.
We have a question in the chat. Do you want to address that one on? It's about the 50 FTEs.
Yes. Yes, so 50 FTEs is what we're looking at across all projects. So if in year one, your project is not generating any enrollments, then that is fine. That is not a requirement, but we need to create a pool of funded applications that will result in 50 or more FTEs There's special coding for HEET students that that is part of the guidelines document, so you can review that. So those students who are supported with HEET funds, they do get coded as such. Does that answer your question? Great.
And I also put in there FTE stands for full-time equivalent student, and 1 FTE is equal to 45 credits.
So the distinction here is we're not talking about head counts, we're talking about 45 credit equivalent. Any other questions? Well, then I'll say more things before I let you all go so that you can think of questions. I mentioned, one of the things that is the main reason why projects have been turned away is the lack of required participating partners, be it labor or employer partners. I know that labor is the harder one to generate and get to participate on the project. But we've also not had a lot of years in the past where we've had a very competitive application pool. Last year, we've had to turn some applicants away or provide partial funding to projects. So in the case, if that happens again, we will be in touch with you to talk about what does partial funding look in the case of your application. And you may choose at that point either to accept that partial funding or say, this does not work for our college. We cannot do the things we want to do with just partial funding. So it will be a conversation at that point. So you're not committing, to taking partial funding. If should that be the case. We've also had instances where the review committee was not quite clear on portions of the application. Sometimes we are left with, but what is the project actually doing? So if that, or, how are the roles going to be split between partners? If it is a consortium, how will the colleges collaborate? If we're not getting that from the application, we've had follow-up interviews. So that is just, heads up that may happen, especially as projects become competitive. We might reach out for additional information. So, please be prepared for that. All right, last call for questions. And of course, if any come up after this webinar, please do reach out. We usually post Q&As that come in after the webinars on our website as well, so that all colleges have access to the same information. And yes, so the employers have to employ unionized workers, and that union has to participate, submit a letter of support describing what their role will be. So they maybe are recruiting students, to participate. Maybe they're negotiating with the employer for release time. Those roles will be determined based on your particular application, but we need to see them clearly articulated, that how the employer partner and the union representing those employers will be partnering. That was the intent of this, original HEET proviso, is to increase that partnership between labor and management. We have not talked about our a frequent partner on these applications, the training fund. Some unions, larger unions, have entities like training funds to act as that intermediary between management and employers. It is not a requirement. If there is no training fund operating in your area, then it is likely to fall on the college to manage that labor management relationship. So just make sure to budget for your time and your efforts in that case. Kyra, does that answer your question? Great. All right, if no more questions, we will give you this 29 minutes back. And please be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.